Hey, what's up, everyone? John Sonmez here, and I am super, super excited. I know I say this all the time. I'm an easily excitable guy, but I'm super excited because I have Tom Bilyeu here, who is someone that I've been telling everyone I'm going to interview him on the channel because I've just been so excited to interview Tom. Tom, if you don't know, I'll let him kind of give his background, but just a quick note on how I discovered him. Basically, I watched him interview an interview that he had done with someone who I highly respect, David Goggins, and he just did such a good job of interviewing him, just the questions he asked and stuff. And so I started looking at his other interviews, and then I realized also that I'm actually sitting there watching the interview while I'm eating a Quest bar, and I didn't make the connection, and then I finally did, and I was like, oh, I'm addicted to Quest bars, and I really like this guy, and so I actually had the privilege of meeting him in person at this Thrive conference I went to, and I thought, man, I got to get this guy on my YouTube channel because there's just so many things that we connect on that I agree with his philosophy after hearing him on stage, and just he just brought down the house. It was just such an awesome, inspiring talk. So welcome, Tom, and thank you.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, gosh, I've got so many things to ask you and to talk about. I mean, well, maybe a good place to start is for people who are unfamiliar with you. Who are you? Who is Tom Bilyeu? What are you doing right now?
Well, there's a lot of questions in there. So what I'm doing right now is I started a company called Impact Theory, which is literally my theory on how to have impact at scale. I like to say that my mission in life is to pull people out of the matrix. And what I mean by that is the matrix, to me, the movie, is just the perfect analogy for a limiting set of beliefs that people have that hold them back, that stop them from doing what they want. And so helping people establish a belief system that is going to empower them and allow them to do the things that they're actually capable of, that really is the central mission of my life. The thing that really thrust me into the spotlight was I'm one of the co-founders of Quest Nutrition. And we took that from not existing to being valued at over $1 billion in less than 5 years. It was an insane, wild ride, and I just had the kind of financial success where I could literally do whatever I wanted. And so my wife and I decided to create Impact Theory, which at the end of the day, its tactical path to pulling people out of the matrix is to create content, both social and traditional narratives. So think TV shows, movies, that are designed to give people that empowering belief system.
That's cool. That's so awesome. I really love that when you shared that your story at Thrive, it connected with me so much. I haven't had the success nearly on the scale that you have with Quest, but I retired early, I did some real estate investment, reached my goal. And what I'm doing here on Simple Programmer is a similar type of thing. I love this idea of pulling people out of the matrix. And it was just, I couldn't go and retire on the beach and just sip mai tais or whatever, and it's but it's so awesome to be able to do something that's like your passion project, like to actually impact. We're I mean, you're still, I think in Impact Theory you've said that it's still a for profit business, but and so is or actually just now this channel is John Sonmez, but my business is still the same, but but to be able to do what you really want to do to change people's lives, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, as you well know, it's a very amazing place to be able to ask yourself, okay, I could retire, but what do I really want to do? How do I want to engage with the world? What's going to bring me a deep sense of fulfillment? And this is my answer. And it needs to be a for-profit company. Otherwise, it will be a momentary charitable donation that will eventually burn out. Or I'll be out there asking for money. And I think that's something that people don't really understand about charities is you have to raise money. It's not like just because you're doing good that you don't need to raise the money. Just instead of doing it in a way where they're exchanging something of value for the money, they go and literally just ask for donations from people. And it puts you in a really weakened state, doesn't give you the kind of control that I want to have. And I think that it's very counterintuitive what it's going to take to pull people out of the matrix. And look, I have a thesis now, but I could be wrong, and we would have to pivot. And going out and sort of begging for my supper, just it doesn't resonate with me. B, I think that being an entrepreneur, especially in today's world, which is so connected, you really are going to be rewarded for building things of value. And that is, we're really in a unique time right now where the greatest marketing vehicle you could have is to go out and do amazing things for people, to deliver a crushing amount of value. Like you would have seen at Thrive, like my whole thing is if I go and do a talk, I'm going to stay and answer questions until there are no more questions to answer. And I've done that for up to 11 hours. And literally just standing there, I don't take a break to pee or eat or anything. I just answer questions. And so, putting it all together, knowing that you can build a for-profit company that is designed to deliver that kind of value, that can really touch people and impact them, and just what I understand about being an entrepreneur and having that drive and that ambition to do something massive. And, don't let me fool anybody. Like, I'm also in this for myself. Like, not only is it deeply fulfilling, but I have, goals in my life that require even more financial windfalls than I've had up to this point. And I just don't see any reason to be bashful about that.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's awesome. And especially, I mean, if you're pulling people out of the matrix and you're teaching them the skills that they need to work hard, to survive, to make money, to become entrepreneurs themselves, and then you're like, oh, but we're not going to take any money for doing that. It's almost like, well, it almost makes more sense to say, no, we're building a company just like we want you to build companies. And that totally connects with me. And I really love your strategy of the 3 phases. I think so many entrepreneurs start with, they have the product first. They're like trying to sell the product, but I feel like you've got it so right, which is to build the community and the audience first, and then you go into the phase where you're finding partners, and then you're eventually building and selling stuff. So I really like that approach. What made you decide to take that approach with this business?
So it's really twofold. So one, I play a game called No Bullshit, What Would It Take? And I think that a lot of times people don't look at the realities of what it's going to take to reach their goal. Like, they have that goal. They know that they want to help people. They want to do something that impacts people at great scale, but they never really stop and ask, exactly how do I want to do that? In what way, very specifically? And then to have the business acumen to say, okay, well, let's back into the solution that's sustainable. So my thing is about creating a self-sustaining economic engine. So, okay, I know I'm going to do that. And then the second part is I'm in the fortunate position where I can afford to build the audience first. And I think a lot of people aren't in that position. And it becomes very tricky, and they have to, do the community building sort of on nights and weekends. And I get that. And if that's what you need to do it. That's originally how we built Quest. It was a nights and weekend thing. And, we were trying to deliver as much value as we could, but we had a whole nother company that we were running at the time. And so now my wife and I have the financial wherewithal that we've got the runway to be able to build the community. So it's not necessarily the thing that I would suggest everybody do. Like back at Quest, I don't think it would have made sense. Like, we needed to have that product that people could go and latch onto, but knowing that the product that we had that people could really gravitate towards was the content. And ultimately, that's what we are. We're a content studio. So we could do the social content right away, immediately build the audience. It just was a stepping stone to get to the point where we could then, which is what we're doing now, creating our first real intellectual property. So we're working on a comic book right now that we have sort of penciled in to come out in June. We're doing it in conjunction with a celebrity. We're working with some of the, or I should say, we're in talks to potentially partner with some of the biggest comic book distribution companies, all their names, of course. And hopefully we can nail that down, which would allow us to really jump to the front of the line. And then the goal ultimately is to turn that into a TV show or a film. I just read a book called Hitmakers, and it talked about how in any creative endeavor, you need to be able to survive a 1 in 1,000 hit ratio. And so we just knew that it had to be that stair step, because you're going to make so many missteps creatively that if you're bankrolling everything, like Lisa and I could go co-finance like $100 million film, but if it fails, we go out of business. So rather than do that, we thought, okay, let's take a tried and true feeder into the system, which comic books has been that for decades. They're very inexpensive, and so you can make those, fail a bunch, find one that finally hits, build community around it. Having that community, you've got negotiating power, because what we really care about financially is maintaining some percentage of the merchandising rights. So that was how we backed into that.
Okay. All right. I really like that. What stuck out is that 1 in 1,000 hit ratio. I think a lot of people think that they're just going to hit a home run, and they put everything into that one business or that one idea. And I mean, if you think about it in the terms of the 1 to 1,000 hit ratio, if you can survive that, that's a lot. That's, that's in my mind immediately goes out to putting out 1,000 YouTube videos, right? Like not just one, not just 100, but I really like that concept.
Yeah, and bringing it back to social, that's 100% right. So we've had a bunch of viral hits, but if you look at how often we put out content, it's like the ratio of base hit to viral hit, it's just massive. So we put out, God, we put out 5 to 7 hours of content a week, every week, week in, week out, now for over a year, and that's not even counting the stuff that we did back at Quest. And, of that, what percentage of north of 1 million hits do we have? Maybe 10 or 15. So it's like 10 or 15 out of, whatever, the 52 times roughly 5, whatever that comes out to be. That gives you the sense of like most of what we put out is a base hit. And that's going to be true in the other side of things as well. Most of the comics that we put out are either going to be a base hit or a total flop. And we're just looking for that 1 or 2 that really jump and say, okay, there's a real audience for this. Then we can go and pitch that to, a Netflix or whoever, and have the power to be able to say, okay, because we've already proven this model out, because we've already built an audience around this, because we're already selling merchandise around this, we want to retain some of those rights and actually have the wherewithal to make that demand.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I was just thinking, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, if I were a novelist, if I were going to write novels, I would count on writing 100. Like that's, because that would be so much of a better strategy than trying to write one and thinking that it's going to be a hit. But so one thing I want to ask you about is, this idea of getting out of the matrix, because this is something that happened to me. I wish it would have happened earlier, but maybe it happened when I was like maybe 27 or 28. And I always say that the universe tapped me on the shoulder and said, John, it's time to wake up. And my life changed. I mean, I suddenly saw things differently. My whole life changed. And I went down this, what I would call the woo-woo path, which was something very strange for me, being an analytical engineer, software developer for such a long time. What was the thing that pulled you from the matrix? What was that experience for you?
I really wanted to be like a single moment that would be really tidy, that makes a great story. The reality is it was a lot of little things over time. There was moments of absolute desperation, and I think that if I didn't have that, so when I graduated film school, this is back in the late 90s, even what they called a no budget film was $100,000. And I didn't know anybody that had $100,000. I'd never had $100,000 in my life. That might as well have been, $100 million. It was like, I didn't even know where to start. And so I felt totally hopeless, totally lost. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life or how I was going to make anything work. The Matrix planted a seed in me, but even that wasn't like some moment where I walked out and was like, oh my God, my life is different. It was like, it was an awesome analogy for, okay, you could do anything you set your mind to, but you've got to like learn that stuff, right? And so in the movie, he learns Kung Fu by downloading. He's got it instantly. And I started asking myself, okay, what's my version of being able to download something rapidly? And for me, it was reading, right? So I was a very slow reader, but Audible allowed me to listen to a book, and I could listen to it at 3x. And so now it was like, whoa, I'm really able to get a lot of information pretty rapidly. And that was a huge breakthrough. And then it was meeting these two guys who would later become my partners in Quest. And they were entrepreneurs and they knew how to think like an entrepreneur. And so I'm reading all these books, and then they're echoing it in real life, what it looks like. And then I go to work for them, but they hire me as a copywriter. But they're like, don't think of yourself as a copywriter. You could be a partner in this company, but you've got to become the right person. So I'm like, wow, all these books are telling me I can learn anything I put my mind to. I've got to like get in, grind it out. And these guys were actually giving me the opportunity to test that and to see if when I add a skill and it has real world implications, like, can I move up? And I did. And so like that's working. And then you really start to believe in it. And the one thing I will say that was like an epiphany was I was arguing for an idea that I knew was the wrong idea in the business. This was a technology company that they hired me on as a copywriter for. And I'm arguing for this idea. I know it's the wrong idea, but I wanted it because it was mine. And I needed that like ego hit of like, yeah, man, you're smart, you're good. And in my head, I'm screaming like, this is wrong. And I had told everybody, myself, my wife, my father-in-law, my friends, my family, I'm going to be rich one day. And so here I am. This is my best shot to get rich. These guys are telling me I can earn my way to being a partner in the company just through performance. And I'm arguing for an idea that I know will move the company backwards. And then I actually convince them that I'm right. And so I have this moment of crisis. And I'm like, what do I actually want? Do I want to just feel good about myself, or do I actually want to get rich? And I thought, at the end of the day, I want both. And there's no way for me to go through life without feeling good about myself. And I really do want to generate wealth. At the time, I'll be really honest, I want to be rich. That's exactly what I was saying to myself. And finally, I realized that I have to switch what I build my self-esteem around to always support my goals. And I didn't have the words at the time, but I've since read a book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. And he talks about the difference between something that's resilient and something that's truly anti-fragile, judging by your reaction. You've read it. And he talks about like something that's anti-fragile, the more you attack it, the stronger it becomes. So I thought, how can I build my self-esteem around something that the more you attack, the stronger it becomes? And the only thing that I can think of even to this day is to be the learner, to always being willing to admit that you're wrong, to always looking for a better, more efficient way to do something. And in switching my self-esteem to that, I no longer argued for ideas that were wrong just because they were mine. My ego was built entirely around being willing to admit that I was wrong, always being hungry to learn, putting in the work to learn. And when you're around somebody that will admit, even if 5 seconds before that, they were arguing for something they really believed in passionately, and then they go, wait a second, you actually just convinced me, because they're open to that. And they say, you know what, I was wrong 100%. You're right. Let's get behind that idea and go. Like, you earn so much credibility with people for doing that. And that's the only thing in my life that was like literally from 1 minute to the next, I realized I have to change completely. Everything else has been like messing up and then like sort of thinking you have it and then messing up some more and just learning from that. A very muddy process. It took a very long time. But yeah, that's been my process.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how true that is. And so few people ever will say, oh, wait a minute. You know what? Actually, you're right. Like, I'm actually wrong about this. It's such a shocker when people do that. And then you have such trust for them after that. It's amazing. So that's a really admirable skill to develop. I actually, in one of my books, I mention to people, just try it out. Just like pick some little thing that you don't really care that much about and just try it and watch people's reactions. It's amazing.
No question.
And you mentioned one of my favorite books of all time, Anti-Fragile. I've read that book quite a few times. I just love that concept of being anti-fragile and building your life around that, and doing stuff that's hard simply because it makes you tougher. That it's such a good concept, I think, that so many people don't grasp onto. I'm staring at your book list here of your reading list. And we've got some of the same reading habits here. I think I've read probably 90% of the books on your book list. So I'm curious. I do the same thing too. By the way, I have Audible and I listen 3x while I'm running and working out, and I get through like 2 or 3 books a week usually. What are your favorite books? What are the ones? I mean, obviously we've got the list here, but out of these, like, what are the kind of books that you would say are just the most impactful, that if someone, because you've got a nice list here, but most people are not going to even, maybe they'll read 1 or 2. If they could only read 1 or 2, what would be the ones?
Mindset, for sure. That's first and foremost. And then depending on whether or not they want to be an entrepreneur or they want to be working within somebody else's organization, the next book I would read is Linchpin. So to me, both of those are so powerful, and whether you want to be one or the other is really irrelevant. And the vast majority of the world, just by the nature of the way businesses are structured, are going to be linchpins instead of entrepreneurs. But mindset will play for both. Honestly, Linchpin will as well, but Linchpin paints a really cool path for people that want to be great within somebody else's company. So those two, I think those are my top 2.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm looking through and I'm seeing, Mindset is definitely a book that I highly recommend. Extreme Ownership. I love that idea of the responsibility, taking responsibility for everything. It's
100%.
all your fault. You've got a shirt, don't you? You have a shirt that says it's all my fault, or
100%.
I love that. Yeah, and Obstacles Away was one of my favorite books. It changed my
So
mindset a
good.
lot. Daring Greatly, another just great book you have on there. E-Myth Revisited, wonderful business book. Yeah, you've got a really
Mm.
good list here. So definitely everyone who's watching this, go and check out, go to impacttheory.com, and then at the top there's learn and click on reading list, and these, go through these books. This is a highly curated list. So, which brings me to the next thing I was curious about. I'm always wondering about. I mean, it's kind of interesting. You've only got so many books that you can read, right? And there's millions of books out there. So one of the things that I always like to ask about too is, how do you pick your books? Because it's funny, like so many people don't realize that it's not just reading. It's you have to be really, really careful, because you don't want to waste time. You've only got so many books. My friend has a site called 2000books.com, and it's basically like, the idea is that you're only going to maybe read 2000 books in your life. So those 2000 need to be really important. So how do you pick them? What criteria do you use? Do you have, what kind of way do you manage your list of books to read and whatnot?
So that really comes down to what I'm focused on at that moment. So I'm pretty much always reading a book about mindset. I think that's the most foundational thing in everyone's life. So I've always got something on the list that either has to do with the brain, mindset, things like extreme ownership, obstacles, the way, always going through something like that. And then the other will be something that I'm trying to learn more about. So right now, the microbiome is huge for me. So I've been reading a lot around those topics. And I read in swarms. So instead of just reading one book on the topic, I might read 7, 8, 9, 10, all different authors, so that I can get a bunch of different flavors, so that I don't become somebody who's just repeating the bit of dogma that I get from one person. I'm hearing where all the different experts fall in the field, where they agree, where they disagree. And that also helps me really lay a foundation of understanding for that topic, so I can begin to form my own opinions. And like, the microbiome became important because my wife was suffering massively from digestive issues. It put our life on hold for an entire year. We spent the next year working with a slew of different doctors. They still couldn't solve the problem. And then I finally realized, I'm just going to have to become an expert in this myself. And so, do you know somebody that's got even an inkling in that space? And in this particular instance, I happen to know somebody who's highly credible in the space. So I just asked him, like, what are the books I should be reading? He gave me 3. I started with those. Those led to other people. Honestly, I go see who's being followed on Instagram, like, for the subject that you care about. And then usually they have a book or they recommend books. And so then I'll start going through their list and picking the things that I think will be most usable in my life. And then every now and then I just chase a fascination. So I just finished this morning, in fact, the biography of Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. And that was great. It wasn't earth shaking for me, but it was really fascinating to hear somebody like that. When we set out to do Impact Theory, it was going to be modeled, or is modeled, after Disney and how they built their empire. And so I read the biography of Disney. And so it's things like that. I'm trying to find things that have real world implication in my life right now.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have a similar. I tend to group the books, and I'll be thinking about something, and I'll read like 5 or 6 books. I tend to call it that. I've been thinking about this concept called book pairings, where I recommend people, like, I was reading this book on called How Not to Die, but then there's another book called Obesity Code, and they're kind of conflicting messages, but it's like, it's so important. I think what you said was that you read multiple books, so you're not just parroting something that one, because it's so convincing when you read one person's argument, but if you don't have the other side of it, you just, you can just fall right into that and not realize that there's a just as convincing argument on the other side.
100%. I totally agree with that. And I think that it's super smart. I like that concept of pairing things. It will serve people well to take in ideas from all over the place, and to watch out for confirmation bias, right? So like, I really believe in the power of mirror neurons. My favorite neurologist of all time is a guy named V.S. Ramachandran, and he like made his career around mirror neurons and how powerful they are. And he's written all these books, and I've read them, and they're amazing. And so when I saw the title of this book called The Myth of Mirror Neurons, it was like, some part of me was like, don't read that. Yeah. And I was like, no, that's the book I need to read. You know, so getting that and seeing like, is it possible that this guy that I respect and this worldview that makes so much sense to me experientially, is it possible that he's wrong or partly wrong? And so by going into that, you refine it. Like if you look at the way that I used to talk about passion before and after I read the book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, that book really changed like how we go about actually developing a passion. And so somebody said to me like, oh dude, you're like the passion guy, like be careful, this guy like totally upsets your theory. And I was like, well then I need to read it, because if it's better, like if he's got something that I can add to this, like there's a great quote from Gandhi. It goes, I'm going to butcher this, but I'll get you really close. It's, I'm not beholden to consistency, I'm beholden to the truth. And I thought, whoa, like that's what I'm talking about. So even if I'm, you know, I've been ranting and raving all day, every day about passion and it's a certain way, and then I read something that makes me go, whoa, that is 100% correct, right? Going back to, I don't take pride in being right. I take pride in identifying the right answer. And so not falling prey to confirmation bias, seeking out things from credible people. I mean, you don't have to listen to every crackpot, but finding credible people that disagree with you and either realizing that they're right or taking the parts of their theory that make sense and making yours more robust.
Yep, I love that. I love that. There's a quote. I'll butcher it too. I love to butcher quotes. Ralph Waldo Emerson. I contradict myself. So what? I'm full of multitudes. Or I can't remember exactly what the quote was. But
yeah, I know the quote you're talking about.
And it's such an important, because so many people don't do that. There's in so many of the, like the biggest life-changing, you know, impacts on my life have been where I investigated something that was totally against what I believed, and then it changed my belief. And it you know, and that's like it's so many people I think never go through that experience ever. And it's sad, but you know, it really becomes extremely valuable. It's one of those things that you know, it's so hard to convince someone, but you know, so the other thing I want to ask you about too, that I'm real curious about is, well, there's definitely two aspects to this, but how you have such great guests. Actually, you know what? I just forgot. I just remembered what I was gonna say in regards to that. And I don't know if you've interviewed him or not, but someone had told me on my YouTube channel, they're like, oh, Grant Cardone, because I'd mentioned Grant Cardone. I was reading 10X Rule and Be Obsessed or Be Average, and they're like, he's a Scientologist. So what he's saying, like, I have no respect for you anymore, because if you believe what he's saying, and he's a Scientologist, and they're crackpots. And so my response to that was actually, I need to read Dianetics, because I never read it, right? And so, you know, not that I became a Scientologist, but it was interesting, I think, to just to see that perspective, right? If you see someone that you respect and they believe something weird, maybe there's something about it that might be true, or maybe there's something about it that you should learn. And so yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point as well.
I don't understand people that are trying to discredit other people. I think that a good idea is a good idea wherever it comes from. And a good idea should be judged by its ability to help you manifest your dreams and your vision. And so even if Grant Cardone were crazy, like legitimately in the nut house crazy, but he had an amazing breakthrough and he said, hey guys, look, the way that you think and talk to yourself about yourself, like really matters in terms of your not only the neurological wiring, but your experience of pleasure in everyday life, your belief about what's possible. Okay, that's just fucking true. I'll tell you that right now. So right. Whether or not he's crazy is totally irrelevant to me. Is what he's saying accurate or not? Can you close your eyes, imagine a world, open them, and use their advice to bring that world to fruition, yes or no? If you can, like, it doesn't matter. This literally is one of my biggest pet peeves. People who are looking for a reason to discredit other people, like, it's just, it's that to me is utter madness. I don't need to buy into their total worldview. I don't need to go become a Scientologist to go, hey, that guy who's a Scientologist has great ideas. So yeah, that to me is foolish, and it's deeply flawed in terms of how we acquire good ideas. It just, yeah, it's crazy.
I'm with you on that one. That is one of the things that will actually get me angry, is when people discredit someone just because, instead of thinking that. And I get it all the time. I'm sure you get it as well, because you talk about a variety of subjects, but I constantly get people on my channel that are like, oh, where's your degree? You don't have a degree in psychology. You can't tell people about how to overcome depression or addiction. You're not qualified. And I'm like, I just listen to the idea. If it works, it works. If it like, don't tell me that I'm not qualified because I lack some kind of authorization from some gatekeeper for an idea to be valid. I think so much of, unfortunately, so much of society, we've kind of steered down that path where everyone judges people by their quality, or tries to discredit people by the character assassination instead of looking at their ideas and saying, is this a good idea?
Yeah, I got really good words to use for that from Ray Dalio's book Principles. And in that he said, look, you may be a novice, you may be a peer, or you may be an expert. When you're a novice, rather than, telling people how it is, you should be asking questions. But once you form an opinion, even if you're not an expert, tell people, look, I'm not an expert, but follow my logic. If you think my logic is sound, give it a shot. If you don't think my logic is sound, fair enough, because I'm not an expert. So my thing is, I've got no problem talking on a subject where I'm not an expert. And I just say, okay, either I have no opinion, or here's my opinion, and just follow the logic. If the logic makes sense to you, then, give it a shot. And if it doesn't, then, hey, recognize that I'm not an expert. So yeah, that, again, I'll take a good idea from wherever it comes. And I'm often surprised by who has good ideas. And also, I don't follow things blindly. So even if an expert tells me something, it's like, I'd still like to see if it works, but I don't shut things down based on who it comes from. I may weigh that, though, in deciding what to, try first if I'm getting conflicting ideas. And I think people should do that with me. There are certain things that I've done, and I'm speaking from, literally having lived it, tried it, and done it. But at the end of the day, there's more subjects that I have never experienced and done from experience. So take it with a grain of salt, follow the logic, see if you want to try it. If you've got an expert in the area that says something conflicting, try theirs first. Like, I've got no beef with that.
Right. Yeah. And I like about you also that even that, you speak with conviction. And I think that a lot of people are afraid to speak with conviction, or because they're afraid, and you could change your mind. And as you could still speak with conviction, it doesn't matter because you believe it at this time. You have all the evidence that shows that this is true at this time. And it's so much better to speak with conviction than to be all, no one follows, no one cares. You're never inspiring or leading anyone by being wishy-washy.
Strong convictions loosely held, right?
Yes.
I've heard that said by many people. And I think that's really smart. If you believe it and say that you believe it, but never be afraid to hear new advice, to change your opinion and move in a new direction.
Exactly. So one thing I wanted to talk about and ask you about is the people that you interview on your channel. I love on Impact Theory, you're interviewing really, really just really good people that maybe I just think so because they're the kind of people that I follow already that have a very similar message. What is it that you're? I mean, there's obviously some pattern to this here, right? It's not like you're just interviewing every famous person or celebrity out there because there's has to be some strategy to this and some selection criteria that you're using just because it's lining up so well with these messages, these overarching messages of working hard, of the self-empowerment and belief systems. How are you doing this? Like, what are you choosing?
So we look for people that have had a level of success, at least in one arena, that people would really take note. And so the easiest way to explain it is, I try to write these really amazing intros that capture why this person has captured my imagination. So they've got to be worth that intro. So having accomplished that's at some kind of level. And then the other is that they're able to articulate their mindset. So some people have done it, but they don't know how to speak to it. They don't know how to help other people do the same thing. And so those are really the two things that we look for. And then honestly, like the fact that they all say the same thing is totally accidental. I'm not surprised. In fact, I was almost certain that would be the case because success just requires a certain way of thinking, and people that have achieved a certain level of success almost always say the same kinds of things. And I do think that there really are universal principles of success. And so that's what comes out of those interviews. But yeah, the world is not short of extraordinary people. So we've been really fortunate to get some of them on the show.
Awesome, awesome. And one thing too that really stood out to me, I think I mentioned it when I first introduced you, is that you have a real talent for interviewing people. Like you really dig deep and get to. I mean, some of the interviews I've seen a lot of people interviewed, right? A lot of the same people because I follow a lot of the people that you interview. But when I've seen them interviewed by you on Impact Theory, it's been some of the best interviews for a lot of them. What's your strategy? Like, how do you go about creating these these really in-depth interviews?
Well, it's a few things. So one, I just do an obscene amount of research. So each person that comes on, it's between 8 to 12 hours worth of research of really figuring out who they are, watching all of their interviews, and trying to pick up where those interviews left off. And then also in the intro, I'm trying to steal what I call their loop. So most people that are interviewed, they get into a loop, they say the same things, used to being asked the same questions, everybody starts at the beginning. And so they just give that same interview over and over and over. And so it's very conventional, it's very pat, like they just, they're in that zone. And so I try to honor them with the intro and talk about all the amazing things that they've done. But I listen, and as I'm watching their interviews over and over, I see the like 6 or 7 things that they're really proud of. And so I mention them right off the top. And in fact, one of my recent interviews, the person said, I think you've said it all, right? Because I literally take their story and say, okay, this is what you tell everybody already. So I'm going to take that. Now it's going to sound awesome. You're going to love it. It's going to like make you feel good. The audience is going to be like, holy shit, like this person's amazing. But it also makes you say new things so that we get to go into new territory. And then second, I tell people before we go on, I'm not a journalist. I'm not here to ask hard questions. You've inspired me, and I want to give you a chance to do that for my audience. And so they let their guard down because they know I'm not coming after them. And that's a big deal, because a lot of people ask questions that make the guest uncomfortable or awkward. It's like the guest will take you to amazing places, revelatory places, but you've got to let them do it in their way, on their time, and just set them up to shine. And then you get just really, really incredible stuff.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of research before the interviews. That makes a lot of sense, and I like this idea of like stealing their thunder first, so that they can't repeat the same thing. Because it's true, in many podcasts I've been interviewed on, I do tend to, and now that I think about it, there's a story. I say the same thing, I answer the same question the same way, tell the same stories. And so, yeah, if you suck that away from me, then what do? I don't know.
Exactly.
I guess I have to start to get even more real. So, okay, that's cool. I will utilize some of that.
Definitely.
Another thing I was going to ask about is, I'm really, really connected to this idea of pulling people out of the matrix. There's a lot of people that watch my YouTube channel here. Oh, by the way, congratulations. I've seen that when I first talked to you at Thrive, I think I had something like 120,000 subscribers, and you might have had like 80 or 90,000, and now you've got like 240,000. So good on you. That's awesome growth.
Thank you.
Exciting. So I was going to ask about, with pulling people out of the matrix, right? Because a lot of people that subscribe to this channel, that are on my channel, are watching this. They're listening to things, and they really want to change their lives, but they're not doing it. They're not actually pulling themselves out. What is it? I guess, if I could phrase the question, it'd be, look, what is the piece of advice that you'd give them to actually make the real pivot and a real change in their life that's actually going to be impactful, rather than just listening? Because a lot of people are addicted to self-help and self-empowerment stuff, but then they never actually, it's almost like at a surface level. They don't really have the belief. They're not actually really pulled out of the matrix. It's almost like they know that they're in the matrix, but they're not out. What does it take for them to get out, to really get unplugged?
There's really 2 things. One, accept that everything is your fault. Right? So your life is an exact reflection of the choices that you've made. Once you own that it's not circumstance, it's entirely you, then it's just about taking action. So making a list of the things that you should be doing in order to make whatever your dream is come true. Or honestly, just stop bullshitting yourself and say, this is the life that I want. And then you can finally enjoy it. Like, I don't think people have a moral obligation to strive, achieve, be ambitious. Like, but own who you are. If you are ambitious, get after it and start taking action. Stop making excuses. And if you're not, then own that and love it and relish in your life. And that's where I get sad. Like, the easiest way to explain it is, I don't think people have a moral obligation to be in shape. So, but if you're going to be obese and you're going to eat that bowl of ice cream, enjoy it. And so often you see people that they're obese, they eat the bowl of ice cream, and then they feel terrible about it and they feel guilty and they're beating themselves up over it. And it's like, look, if you don't want to be obese, you need to start making different choices. And there are people that can help you with that. And there are steps that you can do. And there are ways to break the addiction to sugar and all of that. And if you're totally happy with where you are, then enjoy it and like give yourself over to that life. But living in like that conflict zone of like, I hate who I am, but I'm not willing to do the things I need to do to change it, like, I can think of no greater hell.
Yeah. Wow, that's I can definitely relate to that. So many times in my life, I have been working and felt guilty because I should be relaxing, I should be playing, should be doing something fun. And then when I'm doing something fun, I feel guilty because I should be working. And I had to really, and I still have to work on that, but I had to really click that in my head. That's like, no, you got to enjoy what you're doing, regardless of, otherwise the whole fucking life would be a waste of time. But it's definitely a pattern that people get trapped in.
No question. And John, I really apologize. I had you on my calendar for 30 minutes. And so
Okay.
I'm now 15 minutes late for my next appointment. I'm really sorry. And I'm actually really enjoying myself, which is why I kept not saying something. But I do have to wrap. I apologize.
No problem at all. Before you leave, real quick, I just want to tell people to go to impacttheory.com. Is that the best? And to also subscribe to your YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, perfect. At Tom Bilyeu or on YouTube /Tom Bilyeu. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the extra 15 minutes, and have a good one, man.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, take care.
Peace out.